Hello and welcome to a More Perfect Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Winson. Today, we have a very special guest. They are an influencer with over 2 million followers across all different platforms. They've written a book about recovery, addiction recovery, and is a new friend of mine, someone that I got to get to know over the last couple weeks. And I'm excited to have him on here to talk about his journey so we can hear more about what it's like dealing with addiction, recovering from addiction, and where it goes from there, because there's just a lot of things going on in this world. His name is Ben Fisher. And I'm so excited to have this conversation with you. Hi, Ben.
Hey Mike, how you doing, man? Thank you so much for having me. It's a blessing to have met you just a few weeks ago now.
Yeah.
Right? So this is
Yeah.
very cool to now be on your podcast, and I've been watching all your content on TikTok, and I think it's fabulous, and I'm excited to have this conversation. I'm excited to get to know you better and become better friends, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, the reason, as I said before, the reason I brought you on is you obviously have experience dealing with addiction. And I was just there. One of the things that we like to do on here is give people different views from different perspectives, because the way we grow, the way we learn empathy, the way we just grow like a community is to get different perspectives about different things going on. And there are a lot of people dealing with a lot of problems, just of many different kinds. Especially depression is a big problem, and depression is one of the major causes of things like addiction. So as someone who has gone through it and has written a workbook about it, I thought it'd be great to bring you on here. So if you wouldn't mind, at least just to give everyone kind of that initial perspective on your story, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I can give you the snapshot version, or I can give you the long version. I guess I would like to start just by saying I was raised in a great family, with loving parents, grew up in the church. And I like to start with that just because you hear so many professionals say that addiction is caused by trauma. And I don't feel like that is my story. Now, obviously, I dealt with a lot of trauma through my addiction. I caused a lot of trauma in my own life, but I don't believe that was the cause of why I went down the road I went down. And I don't think that's the case for a lot of people. And I want to make sure that that's clear. And hopefully that relates to some people, because it was very confusing to me, and still confusing to me when you hear professionals talk about it and say that it's caused by trauma, because again, it's just not my story. So yeah, I was raised in a fantastic home. My parents were incredible. They're still incredible. They were my biggest fans. I got my first guitar when I was 7 years old, learned how to play it, immediately started playing in bands. I remember before I got the guitar when I was 7 years old on Christmas, I remember sitting on the couch with my dad, and we were watching the Woodstock documentary, the original Woodstock documentary. And I saw Jimi Hendrix. I saw that, he was the last performance of that Woodstock. And it changed my life. I saw him on the stage and just ripping the Star Spangled Banner. And I'm like, that's what I want to do.
Yeah.
So I want to be that.
Yeah.
Um, and so, yeah, I saw that. And then I started to study these people, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Kurt Cobain, and all these musicians. And what I learned was all these guys were doing drugs, and they were living
Mm,
this rock star lifestyle. So I'm in the back of my mind, like, obviously 7 years old, I'm like, not like, oh, I'm going to go do drugs and start
right.
drinking alcohol
Right.
right away. But somewhere in the back of my mind, it was kind of set there, like, that's what you have to do to get to that point.
Yeah.
Right. And so that kind of started this whole journey of wanting to become a rock star and doing whatever it took to get there. So fast forward through time, through high school, through college, I was playing in bands, and in high school, I was going out and playing gigs all night and drinking, playing in clubs that I probably shouldn't have been in. And it was a lot of fun. And I can say that I was an alcoholic from a very young age. The first time I took a sip of alcohol, and I'll tell you that story real quick. I remember I was about 10 or 11 years old, and my parents were having a party, a family gathering, and I was sitting there in the corner playing my guitar for the family, and one of my uncles came over and like handed me a beer, and he said, take a drink of that. And I remember taking a little sip, and he's like, no, 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 take a real drink. And I downed it. And after that hit me, something changed.
Hmm.
It felt like, wow, this is what's been missing in my life. I feel normal. Cause
Really?
yeah, cause I always felt like I didn't belong anywhere. And when I took that drink, it's like, yeah, this is what I need to be a normal person.
What
Now,
what about the drinking made you feel normal? Because that's really interesting to me as someone who never never really felt a desire to drink at all, even past 21. I mean, I have a drink every once in a while, but it's never been a thing. What about it was felt belonging to you about alcohol?
I don't know for sure, but I can tell you what I think it is. And I mentioned, or we were talking before the podcast went live, that I have ADHD diagnosed. And I believe that when I took that drink, it slowed my brain down,
Mm,
and it let me just marinate and just exist for a second and not have anxiety and worry about what's going on around me, and just my brain going wild all the time. So it gave me a minute to just process things. And obviously, it gave me like a little sense of euphoria, and it made the guitar sound better.
mm,
It made me more comfortable in front of all the people. I have social anxiety. I don't love to be in groups and crowds. So again, it just made me feel normal. It made me feel normal. Yeah. So yeah, 10 or 11 years old, that happened, and that set me now, obviously, I didn't start drinking every day after that, but I can tell you I got a job when I was about 16 at a Skyline Chili, which is a Cincinnati thing. I don't know if you
yeah.
know anything about
Oh, I
that.
know Skyline. Yeah.
Heck yeah, man. If you go to Cincinnati, you gotta go to Skyline. Being in South Carolina now, one thing that I didn't expect when I moved here is how much I would crave Skyline Chili.
Have you gotten the frozen Skyline? They sell frozen stuff down here. I'm
Yeah,
assuming it's not the
yeah,
same.
not the same. It's close. I still buy the cans of chili and go for it, but it's not the same. But I got that job at Skyline, 16 years old, and obviously working with much older people there, they would buy booze. So that really started my journey of like I was able to get alcohol whenever I wanted it. I was back there washing
Mm,
the dishes and drinking vodka while I'm washing dishes, cheap gas station vodka. And it's funny, I, I it, it just hit me. I realized that my alcoholism really started with cheap vodka, and it ended with cheap vodka, and we can talk about that. We can get there, but yeah, that it progressed, and you'll hear people talk about addiction and how it's a progressive disease. So it was all fun and games back then, right? It was all fun. Like I didn't have any terrible consequences. I could have, I was not doing the smartest things while drinking, being a 16-year-old and having a car and all that. But
yeah.
I remember being that young and sometimes coming home and spending from drinking so much and thinking to myself, I have a problem. And I knew very early that I had a problem, and that problem would persist for years to come, years to come. So graduated high school, did all that, played in bands, went to a college called Full Sail in Orlando, Florida, went for recording arts. And, if you know anything about people who are musicians and want to be rock stars, they they were the same as me. A lot of people with ADHD, depression, anxiety, trying to express themselves with music. So a lot of drinking and a lot of smoking pot and dabbled in some other drugs during college. Again, it was still just fun and games. We were just having fun. We were college kids. So I did all that, waited, did well, moved back home to Cincinnati, started a recording studio. My dad helped me build it. It was behind my parents' house. At first, it ended up moving. I ran that studio for like 9 years, actually 15 years. My dad, the one behind my parents' house, for 9 years.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, so where do things go from there? So I I bought all this equipment to start the recording studio, and I didn't have enough clients to make the payments, so I needed to get another job, right, to be able to afford everything and build this business. So I ended up getting a job at a factory. Meanwhile, I have this girlfriend that's in Tennessee, this long distance relationship that I started, and I'm working in this factory. And in this factory, every day, this old man would come over and offer me some pills. He's like, take these and make you feel better. I'm like, no, dude, I'm cool. I'm all good on that. I know where that leads. And one day I get a text and this girl breaks up with me.
Mm.
And this guy, his name's Dog, Tom, but we called him Dog.
That's a great name.
Dog walks over and he's like, hey man, I see you're looking down today. You want a couple of these? And that day I was like, sure. All right.
Mm.
And I took them, and I believe it was Vicodin. Is Vicodin or Percocet? I took them, and they made me feel better. And it was another moment where it was like, oh, this is what's been missing from my life. So that led me down a path of years of being an alcoholic and a drug addict, being
Wow.
addicted to opiate pain medication. And soon after that breakup happened, I met which is now my wife, Olivia. And for years, I was addicted to opiates, and she knew nothing about it.
Mm.
Years went by, and we got engaged. Now we've kind of fast forwarded through this story, and we're all the way up to 2012. We get engaged, and she starts talking about joint bank accounts, and I'm like, okay, I need
Oh,
to get
man.
off. I need to get off of these drugs, because she's going to know something's up.
Yeah.
And I end up getting on Suboxone to get a little bit of help with that. And, Suboxone, that's a whole other story, but it helped. And it got me back on track. But still, like, I'm going to this doctor and I'm spending money at this doctor and the pharmacy, and we're about to have this joint bank account. And it's like, this isn't going to work. She's going to know something's up. So I wean myself off of the Suboxone. And I do that by staying drunk all the time. And that's how I got off. So it and it also kind of felt like I was congratulating myself in a way of like, I did it. I got off of these opiate pain medications that I was on for years. So I'm just gonna drink now. I'm just a drinker.
Mm-hmm.
And my alcoholism progressed. Now, I need to add in here, during this time, I was a worship leader at a church, at a
Oh my.
at a Methodist church this entire time. And that's a whole other story. Sorry, I'm trying to condense a
No,
lot down
this
into one
is,
little bit. So
yeah. There's yeah.
there's a lot. There's a lot. So I'm a worship leader at a church. I'm living this Rockstar lifestyle at night, but I'm this other version of myself on Sunday morning,
Mm.
and I'm just two different people. But I also felt like being the worship leader kind of counteracted the other person I was,
It's
and
like the people that go into church on Sunday and like are somebody completely different when they walk out the door. It's like you went
Mhm.
into church to apologize for everything you did during the week.
Right, right. And that job was my identity. It became my identity. It was who I was, at least who I thought I was.
Mm.
Leading people in music, and I was really good at it. I started playing when I was really young, and I played in bands, and I got really good at it. And I led worship, and people were feeling it, and it was great. And so that was my job. now I'm a raging alcoholic. Me and Olivia get married, and I'm working at the church. I want to make sure I tell this story right here. So my alcoholism got to a point where I was drinking after work every day. I would buy a bottle of booze. I was still working at a factory. I still had the studio. It was a completely different factory at this point. But I would buy a bottle of cheap vodka every day once I got off. It progressed to the point where, okay, I can't spend money on the nice stuff anymore. Like I'm buying the cheap LaSalle Kamchatka stuff. I'd pull into this drive through. They didn't even ask me what I wanted. They just had it. They knew what I was there for. It was that.
Yeah.
And so there was a point where we got married and my wife was 8 months pregnant with who is now our daughter Faye. And she worked second shift as a dance teacher. And I drank, on my way home like I always did every day. She was gone. And next thing I know, she's pulling me out of my car at night. It's dark out at this point. And I guess she came home and she found me passed out in my car. And again, 8 months pregnant,
Yeah.
freaking out. She can't wake me up. She's knocking on the door. The door's locked. She goes in, finds my spare key, and is able to drag me out.
Wow.
And it scared the shit out of her, to be honest with you. And it should have. And so she didn't know what to do. And she knew that I worked with somebody at the church that had a husband who was in AA. He was in recovery for like 25 years at that point. So she called her, and this was my coworker at the church. She was kind of in administration at the church. And so we set up a meeting for us to connect, and her name was Cindy. She's a great woman, a good friend of mine. And she basically said, we need to tell the pastor at the church. So I was like, okay, if that's what we need to do, let's do it. I need help, obviously. And so I tell the pastor, I sit down with him and Cindy, and I tell him everything. Like, hey, I'm struggling with alcohol, and my wife had to call Cindy the other night because she came home and I was passed out in the car. And 2 weeks later, I was getting pushed out of my position at the church, and that broke me.
Yeah.
Absolutely broke me. Because again, I thought that was my identity. I thought that that's who I was. So I I had I had a really big resentment towards, the church and some of the people at that church because of that experience. I now know that, they probably did the right thing. They didn't do it in the right way, right? It was a new church. I had moved from the Methodist church to help him start this new church, and it was at a very fragile moment. Um, so there was a couple years of me like having that resentment, but I've since moved on, and I understand it all happened for the greater good. Looking back on it now, it's like, oh wow, that was kind of the catalyst that really helped me to change my life. But it broke me, and my alcoholism exploded and got even worse.
That's what I
If
was
you can
about to
imagine that.
ask. Because I mean, originally it sounded like when Olivia found you that that could have been the start of the snap that woke you up, the fact that you were willing to actually open up to somebody about it. And then I can't even imagine how crushing that must have been to be pushed out of what was your identity. And arguably that's a problem with a lot of people, especially in the church, because a church tends to be your community, that people that are supposed to care for you, knowing that you're broken, right? Like that's the whole thing we are taught growing up is when the rest of the world lets you go, the church accepts you because it understands that you are broken. I can't that must have been I can't even imagine that kind of pain.
Yeah, it was tough. And again, it kind of, things got worse before they got better. And they, I mean, they were pretty bad, but I would say they got much worse. Olivia started finding bottles all over the place. They were hidden all over. Um, and I was blacking out on a regular basis. I ended up going to treatment, and I started with outpatient treatment and showed up and failed a drug test, alcohol in my system, and they made me go to inpatient treatment. I went to inpatient and came out and fell flat on my face, continued to drink and
Mm.
continued to hide it, continued to drink. Meanwhile, my daughter's born at this point. And, kind of fast forward till she's almost a year old. And this is 2016, day before Easter. And we're supposed to go out with Olivia's parents that night to the Cincinnati Butterfly Garden. Olivia had to work that day. We were going to go that night. And when Olivia leaves for work, I'm in charge of watching my daughter. And this is like, we're coming to my rock bottom. This is rock bottom right here. I want to get to rock
The
bottom so we can get
second
to the hope.
you introduced it perfectly, because my brain is going through all these talkings like, oh no, we're about to hit that point that where the crap hits the fan.
Yeah. And I'll say this first. I'm so fortunate that I never had to suffer terrible consequences for anything that I did because of my addiction. I've interviewed hundreds of people and talked with hundreds of people, and there's so many people who have very low bottoms. And I'm fortunate that I didn't experience that. I'm fortunate that I was able to use what I'm about to tell you as my rock bottom, and use that as the ground to kick off and start going back towards surface. So my wife goes to work. I have my daughter. I'm supposed to take care of her. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, she's gone to work. Now's the perfect time for me to go up and grab a bottle and just knock the edge off before we go hang out with her parents tonight. I'll also say that we lived in Cincinnati at the time, and we had this beautiful home there, and I had just built a little pond on the side of the house, and I was extremely proud of this pond. It looked gorgeous, loved it. So I go buy this bottle. Instead of just drinking a little bit, I drank the whole thing, of course. And next thing I know, it's Sunday, Easter Sunday, and I'm waking up on my parents' couch. And I'm laying on the couch, and my parents are sitting on the couch across from me. And I kind of open my eyes, hungover, and just feeling like, what happened, right? I have no idea what happened. And I can see on their faces like something bad happened. And they don't know the whole story yet either. There's a party planned that day at my parents' house. So Olivia, my wife, shows up an hour early before this party starts. And she starts to tell my parents what I did the day before. But what she didn't realize then is that she was also telling me what I did the day before.
Oh my.
When my wife showed up, when she got home the day before, I was in the pond with my 10, 11-month-year-old daughter in the pond with me, cleaning it out. I had good intentions. We were in there cleaning it out. We were having fun. Now, mind you, it's March.
Yeah.
It's freezing
In
cold.
Cincinnati. Yeah.
In Cincinnati, it's freezing cold. She's 11 months. I'm blackout drunk. So I put my daughter's life in danger. And my daughter and my son now mean the world to me. And I still to this day, like, I get emotional about it. I just can't believe I did that. And my wife told me that, and my heart immediately broke. And I knew that was it. That was the moment. And obviously my wife said, "You're not coming home until you figure this out." That's the day that everything changed. I started going to meetings. I started my 90 and 90 is what they call it. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. I actually think I went to a little bit more than that. I went to more than one meeting a day sometimes. Within, I think it was like 3 or 4 weeks, like I was back home, and back with my family, and things started to get better, and there was some hope. But just looking back on that now, it's like, gosh, I wish I could take that back, but also it was what catapulted me to where I am today. And, it could have been worse. It could have been worse. If something were to happen to her, to my daughter, I can tell you I wouldn't be here today. Um, and I'm not saying prison, right? I just wouldn't be able to live with that.
Right.
I couldn't.
Yeah.
I tell my daughter all the time, like, my job is to protect you. My job is to keep you safe. Because she's crazy. She likes to just get on scooters and run down
Knowing
the
your
hill.
daughter as I do, yes. Yes, she is.
So it's hard to keep her safe, and that's why I tell her that all the time. And that was my job back then too. I loved her just as much then as I do now. The problem is I was sick. I was sick. And that's what I want people to understand about addiction is it's not bad people trying to get good. It's sick people trying to heal. It's sick people trying to get well. And the disease of addiction drives us to do the most ridiculous and sometimes heinous things. And it's not us, it's the disease of addiction. And that's not to give a get out of jail free card type thing. There has to be consequences to your actions, to what you do, because those consequences will be the catapult that leads you toward a better, healthier, safer life and being a good member of society. But there has to be compassion from the people. And that's why I'm so thankful to my wife, to my parents, and to my in-laws, which I left that part of the story out this time. I tell this story all the time, and it's different. It's different every single time. And a lot of times I don't even talk about the pond incident, just because I'm still worried about what people will think of me because of that. But there was another part of that story where I was extremely unkind to my mother-in-law, and said some things that were untrue to her. Apparently, I don't remember it, but I said some pretty nasty things to her. So it's just a bad day, but that bad day turned into a good thing. Eventually, there's a lot of pain there, a lot of trauma that was caused because of that, but it wasn't what caused my addiction. My addiction caused the trauma.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of, what I try, because obviously, I have not had to experience that, but I mean, everyone deals usually with some level of it. I definitely have over my period experienced some level of it as well. Obviously not to that extreme. For me, the thing that comes to my mind, and I'd be interested in your perspective, it's almost as though because there's always going to be struggles. There's always going to be things that are stressful in our life. And one of the things about addictions it's always something that makes you feel good. So you were talking about the fact you've got ADHD and the alcohol when you were a kid kind of slowed you down, and it made you feel good. It made you feel comfortable in society, in your current life at that point. And whether it's alcohol or drugs or pornography or all the other things that are gambling, it's those highs that make you feel good so you can forget the lows. The thing that I've always noticed that I had to work my way through, just dealing with all of the stuff in my life, is the reason you mentioning what happened to you with the church hit home to me is there is this problem that I feel that we've got in society where we want the world to think we are good, and we want it so bad that we end up doing these things that make us feel good in order to hide the fact that we aren't good to society. And it really emphasizes this point where if we all know that we fail, if we all know that we struggle, then we should be okay being able to have these conversations with other people about our struggles. And because we all go through it, we literally all go through it. It always looks different.
Yeah.
Some are more blatant than others.
And the church should be the place where that can happen. I mean, obviously it should be able to happen anywhere and everywhere, but that's kind of like the calling card of the church is come here. If you're broken, come here and learn about God and grow closer to God and heal because of that. And in my experience, like, that wasn't necessarily the case, and I don't think it was the church's fault, but it was. I don't think it was the church's fault. I don't think it was my fault either. I just think that was my experience through it, and it's led me to where I am today, and kind of meeting you at church and this new chapter. And it's like, okay, what is this all about? Like, what am I going to learn through this? And that's where my life is today, is kind of like I can take a step back and look at it and just say, okay, what is this trying to teach me? What is, and before, running through life, it was just like, why is this happening to me? Why am I going through this? And now it's like, how do I use this for good? And what is this trying to teach me?
So
yeah,
I want to, this next part, I want you to go in. We had a conversation a little bit before a few days ago, as we were talking about doing this episode, and you mentioned that part of your recovery had to do with guitars. And I would love it if you would talk about that situation, and maybe even a little broader on, just because you've talked to a lot of people, what do you think people should know about what recovery looks like just in general for people that are going through this?
Let me just kind of roll through my story a little bit and talk about the guitars and get to that second part of that question. So I did the 90 and 90, started to get my life back together, was sober, started to feel happy again, started to feel okay in my skin. And I did that for 3 years and was quiet about it. Didn't tell anybody, really what I was struggling with, other than the few people that knew: my parents, Olivia's parents, Olivia, and that pastor and the pastor's friend, and whoever they told, type thing. And, because I was still embarrassed by it, still ashamed by what I struggled with. But I kept having this gnawing feeling like, I should share this. And my dad's a woodworker. He's got a beautiful wood shop, and my mom's best friend's husband is also an incredible woodworker. He's got a beautiful wood shop. And I remember being at a family party, and that friend had actually dabbled in building acoustic guitars. And he came over to me and said, "Ben, I want to teach you how to build guitars." And I'm like, okay, like I've never really, I'm kind of handy. Like, the apple didn't fall too far from the tree with my dad. Like, I can do a little bit of this stuff. I'd love to learn. And looking back on it, I feel like my parents were having conversations with him, and like he kind of knew that, like, I needed something to do. I needed to get my hands going with something.
Yeah.
So I started going over to this guy's house, and he was manipulating the wood and bending the wood and cutting the different cross sections and just building these guitars and showing me how to do it. And while he was doing that, he was telling me stories of his life and some hardships that he went through. And this light bulb went off in my head, like, man, I should make a documentary about my recovery and tie it into guitar building. Build a guitar and talk about my recovery at the same time. And I kept putting that idea off. Like, I don't have any equipment to do that. Like, uh, I don't want to put my shit out there into the world and let everybody know what I'm dealing with. But the idea kept gnawing at me. And the idea was, if you can help one person, you have to do it. If you
Yeah.
can help one person, you have to do it. So finally, I'm just like, you know what? I got a cell phone. I got an iPhone, a decent one. I'm just going to do it. And then the idea grew into like, oh, wait a minute. This isn't going to be just a single documentary. This is going to be a documentary series where I interview other people, because at that point, I wasn't really comfortable with getting in front of the camera. So I'm like, how do I get around that? Oh, let's interview other people and get their story. So I kind of like squirmed around it that way. So I started filming this, and then made an announcement about it, and started a page called A String of Hope. And that idea just kind of blew up. I ended up making like 20 episodes of this, and a lot of them are just extremely cool. And like these stories I was telling you about, of these incredible lows that these people hit, and for them to bounce back and be just, they've ended up saving so many other people, because, they've made it out. Like, some of these people have been Narcaned back to life 15, 20 times.
Wow.
And when I hear the stories of people, like there's a guy in Butler County, Ohio, the sheriff there or something, talks about how they're only going to Narcan people 2 times, and they're just going to let them die. And it's like, what? What are you talking about? Because I've seen people who have been Narcaned 20 times, and now they're one of the greatest people I've ever met in my
Mm.
life, with the amount of impact they've made on the community and helping people. So that's a different story for
Yeah.
a different
No.
day. But so I started that. I started building guitars, and I started filming it, and I started filming the documentary series, A String of Hope. Started this page, and it took off, and it grew to 10,000 followers the first year. And when that happened, I'm like, I've made it. I did it.
Yeah. That
10,000
first.
followers. It doesn't get any better than this.
Yeah.
And then the second year, it grew to 100,000 followers, and I'm just like, what is happening here? Um, and then the third year, between third and fourth, it grew to 1 million followers. And that was it. I started a TikTok at the same time. And at this point, like, the whole String of Hope thing kind of morphed into something different, into like just general hope, not just addiction. I didn't want to be cornered, right? Recovery is a huge part of my life, and I love to talk about it, but there's so much more to talk about. And I didn't want to be typecast, you know what I mean, into that corner. So I started sharing just these little short quotes, and some of them just started to go nuts and blow up. And Shaquille O'Neal shared one. It was blowing up before he shared it, but he shared it, and like, that was a big moment for me, like when I saw his page and do that, because I remember playing Shaq Fu, the video game, when I was a kid, and just watching him on the TV. And like, I think he's a great dude,
Yeah.
all around. And I just thought it was really cool that happened. And
He strikes
it
me
just,
as that kind of, everything I've seen of him. He's like, he likes those kind of quotes, those, like,
yeah,
he just goes around and he tells people things. Like, I could just see his low voice. I can't even do it as low as he is, but he just goes around and says a quote to someone.
yeah, yeah. So it was pretty cool, and it's grown, and I'm still doing it. It's morphed again. It's, instead of being these short little quotes, I'll talk for about a minute. Um, so I'm just kind of rolling with it, but it's still called A String of Hope. And a lot of people don't know what the origin story is of that, because I have so many followers that have never seen an episode of the actual
Of the
guitar
actual,
work.
yeah.
You know what I mean? And, so it's pretty cool to be able to tell that story and have some new followers be like, oh, that's why it's called A String of Hope. I get it now. So that's kind of the origin. And it's a testament to, not everybody who's going to get sober and find recovery is going to like start a page and blow up to 1 million followers. And that's not really what it's all about. It's just about living a healthy life and helping your community and helping that one person. And if you keep that in mind and you keep that as your purpose, just helping others, and that's a big part of the 12 steps too, is passing it along, is, reaching back, after you figure it out, reach back and help the next person. So I really took that to heart and used that as, kind of my guide on how I was going to do it. And that kind of gets into this book. Now, this book has 9 steps in it, and it's really the 9 steps that I took, and like 3 out of the 9 steps are very close to 3 of the steps that are in the 12 steps of can I guess I can say AA or NA, but they don't like when you talk about it in public. So we'll just say kind of the 12 steps.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's I'm still living by that motto of how do I help somebody today? How do I serve somebody? And that keeps me moving, I think, in the right direction. I make mistakes all the time. I talk a lot about things in a way where people think that I have a lot of wisdom. And I don't necessarily see that way. I think very hard about the things I say before I say them. And that's why a lot of times it's very hard for me to do these podcasts, where you have to talk for a long time because you don't have time to like really think about what you're going to say. Because I want to be careful with my words, and make sure that what I say, because I could be a different person 5 minutes from now and look back and be like, I don't even agree with what I just said 5 freaking minutes ago.
Well, if 5 minutes from now you disagree with a lot, you can let me know and I'll make sure this all gets cut out.
Oh, we'll be good. We'll be good.
Because while you were talking, I was just sitting here contemplating, what does getting over addiction look like for the average, for most people? Because obviously it's going to be, but are there like consistencies about what recovery from addiction looks like? Like, because obviously with like alcoholic addiction recovery, most of the time, if not all the time, you end up just staying away. Part of it at least involves staying away from alcohol. Part of it involves staying away from those specific things that affected you. But what else is pretty common for what does recovery look like for most people?
There's a saying that recovery looks different for everybody, right? But obviously, like, we're all human and we have, very similar circumstances for the most part for what we're dealing with. There's a lot of things that have to happen for you to get sober, for you to find recovery. It starts with the willingness, of course, and then there has to be some kind of work that you put in. And then it has to segue for you to maintain your recovery. It has to segue into helping others, in my opinion. Like, I think that those are pretty mandatory, those steps. Willingness, putting the work in. The work in for me was going to meetings, meeting with other people who were in recovery, who were doing it right, who had it figured out, and staying connected with those people. I'm still connected with a lot of them today. I talk with one of my friends, Jeffrey, at least once a week, and we just check in and see how we're doing and talk about how life's going. And if we need to talk about anything that has to do with addiction, we will. And then just staying focused on how do we serve other people in whatever fashion that is. I think that's important. But, recovery does look different for some people. Like, I know a lot of people who were addicted to fentanyl and they still smoke pot and they consider themselves in recovery. And there's a lot of arguments on that. There's a lot of old timers in AA are like, you're not sober, blah. But for me, it's your recovery, right? And if you're not sticking a needle in your arm and playing Russian roulette every single day, and you're smoking a little weed here and there to get you through, and you're going to be able to live a long and productive life because of that, I consider that recovery. It's going to piss a lot of people off, but I don't care. That's what I believe. And there's so many other just examples of that. It really comes down to, are you able to, because addiction, what it boils down to is your life unmanageable, right? And my life became unmanageable, and that was addiction. That was full-throated addiction. So if you're able to manage your daily life and be somewhat happy. Now, obviously, I still struggle with a lot of depression and things, and some days are harder than others, but my life's manageable today. I can get through, and that's what I think recovery is.
What kind of stuff could me or the people listening or anyone, if you were to give me some advice on how I interact with people that are dealing with it, what would be some advice for people that are interacting in that way?
That's it. For me, it always comes back to the golden rule: treat others the way you want to be treated. I talk about it all the time. Empathy. It comes back to empathy. Put yourself in that person's shoes. Imagine. And it's very hard for people who have never dealt with it to imagine doing that, because they still think that it's a choice. Obviously, it was a choice for me to start to pick up the drink in the first place. There is choice involved, but there's something that happens in an addict brain where things start to change, literally change. And it's just your brain literally thinks that you need that as much as you need water to survive. And I wish people understood that and could put themselves in the shoes of that person and have empathy, because then they would be able to treat them the way they would want to be treated if they dealt with it. So it all comes back to compassion and trying to put yourself in somebody's shoes and understanding that this disease can happen to anybody. It's not just happening to people who are homeless and on the street, and it's not just happening to people who were raised in a terrible environment, abusive environment, and this or that. But let me be an example of that. And that's why I mentioned that at the beginning of this. I was raised in a fantastic, loving, caring home, and it still got me. It wrapped its arms around me and tried to kill me. It can happen to anybody. And I've met people who were very functional, and they've made millions of dollars, and on the outside it looks like they have it all together, but their life at some point became manageable because of it. So don't look at people, don't look down on people who have struggled with it. It's a human condition, just like diabetes, right? It's very different. Addiction is a different bird, where treatment is different. Obviously, you can't just take drugs to get over it. Obviously, there's MIT, like there's medication assisted treatment. MAT. I don't know why I said MIT. MAT. Medication assisted treatment, but in general, like, you can't just take a medication to get over the disease of addiction. You have to go and get into meetings and talk to other alcoholics and addicts to really get over it. So really, it boils down to compassion. Try to understand, seeing through their eyes. And I think the world will be a much better place because of that.
It even feels, because the one thing that I always come back to is every time we make a mistake, it's really, we talked about this desire to not be looked at as a failure. So that's why we hide all of our failures. And I feel like one of the big things, at least, in any time that I think one of the ways that I got to a point where I can grow out of my failures is having people in my life that, even when I mess up, even when they tell me I mess up, I know they are still there, and I know they will still listen to me, and I know they will still be there when I call. Like it never changed that relationship. And the times where I've gone down the worst was just like you with going and talking to the church, to your pastor, was those times where, whether it's I was found out or I went forward with it, and everyone who I thought loved me, cared for me, was there for me, just disappeared. And it was at those moments that you, like, you never just end up staying right where you are, right? It's always, there's always a dip after that, because these people that you thought cared about you and were there for you are no longer there. And I think people don't always realize that that is a catalyst for a lot of people to go from bad to worse. And depending on what your life situation is, like you mentioned homeless people, I think a lot of the times the reason, I mean, there's multiple reasons people become homeless, but sometimes, like, they become homeless and then they become addicted to other things because of the stress of being homeless, and it just becomes down, and they never have any outlet way to get back up. And without that support, without that community behind you, it's, I mean, it takes work obviously on the person who is dealing with all of this. It takes a lot of work, but without that community, and that's the purpose of all these support organizations, right, is to give people that idea. But sometimes I wonder how much faster and how much even easier so many people would learn, would grow, would even just get through these hard times if the communities that they already had actually continued to be there and be part of their community. Because bad things are going to happen to every one of us. It obviously at different levels, but they always do happen. And again, at my times when I was at my rock bottom is when things started getting bad, and then the people that I thought were going to be there for me weren't anymore.
Yeah.
So then I had nobody but myself. And when things are bad and you go to yourself for something, I guarantee you're just going to keep going down.
Yeah. The big problem with people struggling with addiction, and that is, it starts with that willingness thing. And a lot of people who are struggling with addiction aren't ready to stop. They might say it in the moment, and then, their brain again is telling them, you have to have this. So they find a way to get back out there and do it. And the people who are on the other side of that run out of patience and they run out of compassion because they think to themselves, they don't want to change. And that's a very hard thing. And, you hear a lot about enabling, and, mothers and fathers who enable and they don't even know they're enabling. That's a whole other thing we can talk about.
That's a whole new episode.
Yeah, but I say that just to say I get why people who are struggling with addiction lose everything, and they lose the people in their lives, because sometimes they have to hit that rock bottom to make a change. And I've seen so many people get that back. They get people back. Now, sometimes people screw things up so much that they don't get some things back, right? So sometimes, like, the best thing you can do in that situation for somebody with addiction is to show tough love and separate yourself from them. And I know that sounds contradictory to the whole compassion thing, but that actually is compassion in my mind. Of, you're going to have to go and figure this out. I'm here for you. I'm not going to enable you anymore to do what you're doing. That tough love. So, it's such a weird thing, because it's such an unfortunate thing too about the disease too, because it's like, gosh, I feel so alone already. And here I am struggling with this, and I can't freaking figure it out because my brain's telling me I need this, like I need water. And here this person is, they're not going to help me anymore. Even though they love me more than anything and I know it, it's such a tough thing. And I wish that I'd be a gazillionaire if I had that figured out.
So this question just came to me, and do you think, looking back on everything, that, and again, not because I'm sure not anyone specifically was to blame, but do you think there was anything that could have been done differently for you growing up as a child that could have veered it away in a different direction? I know you're younger than me, but back when we were younger, ADHD wasn't interacted with and treated in the way that it is now. There are always catalysts of things. There are always problems. For you, some of it was stress, but some of it was, you deal with things like ADHD, and that kind of got you going. If there's someone who's a parent, not to like guarantee, because there's never a guarantee, but like if their kid's struggling, get them help. Like if you're noticing things, don't just say, oh, he's fine. Like, is there anything like that?
Unfortunately, I don't think so. And that scares me to death because I see a lot of similarities in me. I see those similarities in my daughter.
Mm,
And it's a very scary thing because I had to do the research myself.
mm,
I was diagnosed with ADHD. They tried to put me on medications. The medications that they put me on, I think it was Ritalin or Adderall, one of those, just didn't work for me. At least, possibly my parents could have kept trying with different things and kept taking me to psychiatrists and going through that. But inevitably, I would have ended up doing that research. I would have found the drink and had that feeling and gone down that path. Um, things could have got worse. Things could have been better, I'm sure. But I
it's all
don't
that
think any.
uncle's fault.
And, I tell that story, and I remember my mom asking, which uncle was that? And I told her, and unfortunately, I love that uncle. Unfortunately, he's not with us anymore. He's a great dude, and he didn't know any better. He was an alcoholic himself.
Mm,
But if it wasn't that uncle, it would have been somebody else. Eventually, I would have had a sip of alcohol. It's inevitable in our culture today. It's everywhere. Alcohol is everywhere. So it would have happened. Um, so I don't blame him whatsoever. And I begged my mom to please don't blame him. And I think my parents have struggled a lot with blaming themselves
mm.
for it too. Like, what could they have done differently? And that's, I guess that's the positive about it is like, no, nobody could have done anything. Like, it's just an experience that I had to go through and learn. And thank God that I was able to be functional for many of those years and come out alive, because so many people are dying um, uh, because of fentanyl, these drugs that are so powerful nowadays. Heroin was a big deal back in the 80s and 90s and even before, and people were dying from it, but not at the rates that we're seeing today because these drugs are so powerful. And it's like the first time you try it could be the last time you try it. Um, and it's a scary thing because I wish there was an answer to that where it's like, the answer is like, how do we get this stuff wiped off the planet? And here's another whole podcast. You can go to the gas station up the street or the smoke shop and you can buy legal heroin. You can do it. It's not called heroin. They call it 7-OH, which is a type of kratom that is very condensed. Condensed isn't the word. What is the word I'm looking for? Extracted. And I read something the other day. I've done a lot of research on this because I used to write blog posts for an SEO company for a lot of addiction treatment centers. So I've learned a lot about it. But they say that the 7-OH is 100 times more powerful than morphine. I don't know if I believe that. That sounds ridiculous. But it's even if it's just as powerful, You know what I mean? They're selling it at right down the street,
Yeah.
everywhere you go, and it's
Like
an
a 7-Eleven
epidemic.
or something. Yeah.
Yeah, and they're talking about banning it. The administration right now is talking about banning it. Well, that's going to be a huge problem when they do, and they don't realize it, because all of these people are all of a sudden not going to be able to get this drug. They're going to go out and get something else, something that's even more dangerous potentially off the street.
Or do something more dangerous to get something that just gets them that fix that they're addicted to.
Right. So it really comes down to like figuring out a way to just slowly get rid of this stuff completely, these things that are so incredibly addicting. And you know, I believe, in my opinion, alcohol is top of the list of one of the worst drugs that's out there, because it's so widely accepted and it's so widely available. Same thing. You can go up to the gas station and buy a bottle of booze whenever you want it. And, you know, what good does it do? It's terrible for your health. It's, you know, it's causing all kinds of accidents on the road. It's just a public nuisance whatsoever. And a lot of people, you talk about that and they get very like, you know, not offended, but just
Defensive.
Exactly. Defensive about it, because they like to sip on a little bit of alcohol.
Yeah.
And a lot of people can do it.
It calms them down.
Yeah, they can have 2 drinks. Me, the way my brain works and the way a lot of people's brains work is I have to have all of it right now. Give me all of it. One leads to 100, a never-ending cycle. So really the fix is, you know, how do we minimize the accessibility of this stuff? And on top of that, how do we expand treatment for it and knowledge about it? You know, I believe that they should be teaching this stuff in middle school, of how dangerous these drugs are and how the brain functions when these things happen. Like, you should be learning about it in health class. And I know, and I know they do to some extent, but it comes down to education. It comes down to minimizing accessibility of it. And it comes down to having compassion for other human beings, and knowing that, you know, we're all very similar, but we're all very different too. And you know, you don't know what's going on with somebody else. You don't know how somebody else feels and what they're going through. But if you try, I think the world becomes a better place.
Well, Ben, I feel like we probably could talk for another hour if we wanted to about this. You gave me a lot to think about, that's for sure. I appreciate you coming and spending time. Guys, we will put a link to both Ben's TikTok and Facebook, as well as a link to his workbook. So if you want to check it out, you can absolutely do that. Again, Ben, thank you so much for spending time. Thank you, everyone that's made it all the way to the end here. If you like what we do here on A More Perfect Podcast, please consider hitting all those buttons down below. Like, subscribe. We're available YouTube, Apple, Spotify, TikTok, Instagram. We're everywhere. So again, thank you, Ben, for hanging out. I really, really appreciate it. And everyone, just love, empathy, humanity. That's what we need. That's what this community preaches all the time. So just remember, we will all go through hard times. Let's be there for each other, because it's gonna be a rough time.
Yeah.
All right.
It's life. It's life.
It's life.
I appreciate you, Mike, and thank you, everybody who listened here. And this was great. Again, fantastic to get to know you better, and I'm excited to continue to get to know you and kind of get back into church and figure out where that's going to fit in my life.
By the way, Ben is an amazing musician. Amazing musician. I can confirm, having played with him a couple times. All right, guys, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And again, like, subscribe, follow, and we'll see you next time on A More Perfect Podcast. Bye, guys.
Peace.